It's lovely to be with you this evening. So I want to switch gears a little bit, despite starting my career in social work and having some experience in care homes and other social work topics. We're going to talk about something a little bit more mundane, which is e-commerce. And so a little bit more practical. And for those of you who do UX, can I have a show of hands? How many of you are UXers? Okay, great. Hopefully this will be of use to you. And so, let's go down here. Great. Okay, so doing ethnography for an e-commerce organization is a little bit like pitching a slow food movement to a fast food restaurant. Ethnography is time consuming, it's expensive, it's labor intensive, and a lot of e-commerce organizations are very quick and fast paced, and they're really interested in what can you give me quickly, what insights can you give me quickly, how can I improve the conversion, how can I improve my ROI, how can I improve my upgrades on these transactions. So I think that ethnography is just one part of a well-balanced user experience research program. This slide should be familiar to most of you UXers. So this is a lot of different research methods and where they fall on the continuum of qualitative versus quantitative. And so ethnographic field studies are right there in the middle. But I really believe that that's a sweet spot, and that's where really important insights lay. And if you really are interested in going deeper and understanding what's happening with your website, making real improvements, that's something worth doing and including. So the goals of ethnography are showing your organization what real life is like for your customers. So getting out of the usability lab, getting out of the focus groups and market research labs, let's talk about what really happens in the real world. The real world includes interruptions by screaming babies, and puppies that soil carpets, and telephones ringing, and spouses coming home, and all kinds of other different things. It's interrupt-driven, it's dirty, it's difficult. So the goals of ethnography are to help shape your strategy and give you a taste of reality. So back to that well-rounded user research program. If you're in an e-commerce organization, you're probably doing good things already. You're probably doing the right things already. You're doing regular usability testing. You're doing regular A/B testing. You're coordinating with both your front-end sales call center and your back-end support call center. You're tracking those different metrics, and you're doing that repeatedly over time. So if we're looking at this across quarters, that's great. You've got a pretty well-balanced approach, but what you're missing is ethnography. And remember when I said slow food? This is what I'm talking about. This is not something that happens in a week or a month. It's something that happens over multiple months. It may take a year. It could take more. It really depends on what your approach is, what's really important to you. And so what I'd like to share with you today is a little bit more about that, about how much time that takes, about my experience with a particular project for a particular type of company, type of e-commerce website, and the decisions that I made and some of the deliverables that we came up with. So, why would an executive in their right mind fund something that is going to be so time-consuming and so labor-intensive? It's a hard sell sometimes. Your competition eating your lunch is a good starting place. So is your stock down in your company or your client? That might light a fire to help the execs make an investment in some deeper research. Are your leaders actually leaders? If they are, they might be more willing to do this, and this can be an angle that you can use to help motivate them. How mature is your UX organization? So are you just getting started? Do you have buy-in? How mature is your process? Are you doing all of the right things? Do you have a staff? Is it just you? All of those things need to be considered. How open is your organization to change and innovation? If you're happy doing the status quo, there's no need for you to do this kind of project, and I wouldn't suggest it. But if you've got that desire to understand the real world experience, but more importantly, where this company, where this organization fits into the larger ecosystem, that's the good reason to fund ethnography. Because when you're working with in-house in an organization, or you're working at an agency for a particular client, it can be really easy to forget that this is one company in an entire landscape, and that people have choices. So they're on your website, but their real world need is to buy XYZ item, buy this widget to meet this need. And they don't care. They do not care about your website. They don't hesitate to come to your website from some other website, and as soon as they're done, and you've either met their need or you haven't, they're on to the next thing. So don't overestimate the importance of the website that you're working on. We all, we spend a lot of time, we spend a lot of effort working on this website for a particular company, and it's easy to think that it's more important than it is, so don't make that mistake. Okay, so you want your executive to fund your ethnography. It's probably best to start by putting yourself in their shoes. Empathy for executives is maybe a weird thing to suggest, but what is it that the executive actually needs? What they need is ROI. What they need is strategy. Where's your strategy actually coming from? Who's creating your strategy for your website? If it's a lot of companies, they're taking kind of a haphazard approach, and this is a great opportunity for you to step in and show them real world reasons to have a different strategy than what you've got right now. And this is our first warning, because ethnography is really about truth-telling, and speaking truth to power is sometimes a dangerous thing. So, tread lightly, understand the reasons why you should be doing this and why you shouldn't. And I've got a laundry list of reasons not to do it when it's not a good time. You want to avoid ethnography if your site is on fire, if you've been having lots of problems and things are breaking. It's not a good time to start a project like this. Do you have a small budget? It's not a good time to start a project like this. Is your UX team not on good terms with the rest of the organization? It's probably not a good time to start this. Do your execs not understand or value what you do? Don't start this. Are your execs more interested in promoting their own agenda than in learning the actual truth? This is not a good time to start an ethnography project. Okay, but you've decided those things don't apply, you're ready to jump in and get started with ethnography. So the first thing you've got to decide is, what is your focus going to be? So the case that I'm sharing with you today is for an e-commerce site that is selling computers. This is a US-based international computer manufacturer and retailer. And the study and the people, the population that we're concerned with for this study, are US-based. I've done a lot of global UX research, and I think there are some cross-cultural universals when it comes to purchase decisions and purchase process, and it starts with research, consideration, and purchase. These three things are universal to all buying across all cultures. What they might look like in different cultures changes, but those three things are key to all of them. So, what is our focus going to be? This focus was research, consideration, and purchase, but we didn't want to miss the opportunity to get a holistic experience documented and brought back into our organizational culture. And so this was initially inspired by a compelling approach. And so some of you might be familiar with the hairy godfather of UX. That's Jared's school. Jared's got an approach called compelled shopping analysis. And I've always been intrigued by this because it's a little bit different than standard usability testing, because instead of just saying, oh, sit down in front of this computer, we're going to watch you buy a canoe, they find people that are like, I really need some new camping equipment. And then they say, you know what is it that you need? Oh, I need a canoe. We're going to buy that canoe for you as long as we can watch you do it. That's kind of the basic of compelled shopping analysis. The problem with that is that when you're selling something like a computer that's highly configurable, where does that stop? If I tell you I'm going to buy a computer for you, do I then influence what you wind up configuring? I think that I do. So we didn't do that for this particular kind of study. We went with a different approach where we were balancing the business needs and the user needs, and there's some trade-offs there. So we took this alien perspective to try to get at our ethnographic goals. And this is the basics for our study. We had a three-tiered approach. You could think of it as three different studies, starting with this bigger population of people who were just learning. They were trying to gather information for this purchase and make that initial decision. People who made that decision were ready to buy and actually bought that computer, and then people who took delivery of that computer actually took it out of the box, set it up, and used it. So as you can see, we've got kind of a narrowing funnel. We started with people who were a larger group that we paid a flat rate in terms of recruiting. We used professional recruiting, but we also sourced via online channels because we were looking for people who were willing to shop online. That wasn't the only way that they were able to get research and consideration for this purchase. So if they wanted to go in-store, if they wanted to go to a big box retailer, that was okay. And we followed them there in some cases, interviewed them in parking lots when we got kicked out of the store for photographing and videotaping, and took lots of pictures along the way. But we had both attrition, and we also had people that we were more interested or less interested in talking to. So as the study went on and people were ready to purchase, we narrow the number of participants involved. As those people purchase, we have different quotas that we're interested in fulfilling. We narrow again for use. Okay, so when you're undertaking something like this, coordinating with your other departments, other functions is really critical. So again, slow food, this is taking a lot of time. And so you want to get that buy-in early. But going back here, because this is going on over time, you do get the benefit of staggering some of those activities and planning work. You don't have to do everything absolutely up front. As the Learn study is underway, you can start planning and coordinating for some of the other things. You have to understand what you can push off till later and what needs to be done right there. Negotiation. Working with these different departments and different functions, everybody has something that's important to them. What you think is going to be a simple endeavor, not so simple. This is the basic criteria in terms of what we were looking at to recruit consumer users. So we're looking at demographic information, we've got some other must-have requirements, but wait, there's more. So then we've got additional psychographics and demographics, but we're not just interested in consumers for this study, we're also interested in small business users, because in this particular company, there's a belief that there's overlap significantly between people who are small business owners and consumers in terms of the way they behave and the way that they buy, and so now we've got small business users and their criteria, and even more. So be prepared to take some time to whittle down that criteria, get clear on it, get that buy-in up front, because if the marketing department, or whoever it is that you're working with, has something that you don't include, your findings might be discounted, then all of that slow food has gone for nothing. And in fact, marketing's got personas that they want represented in this. So we have that laundry list of criteria. We've got psychographics, we've got demographics, and now we've got to include this particular persona. But wait, there's another persona. So now we've got to understand all of this criteria and develop a matrix for our recruiting and make sure that we're representing all of those different things. That was a lot of work. So we found those people and we spent time with them. We spent time with them online, we spent time with them in store, we spent time with them in their homes and in their businesses, and talking to them along the way. And that was a lot of work, and it took a lot of time, and now it's time to bring it back to your organization. So how do you take this teraflop of data that you've collected and then turn that into something useful that your fast food organization can actually do something with? So I've got a couple of examples of different types of deliverables. I'll start with a summary of participants. This is not a comprehensive list, but I'm just showing this to you to give you a flavor of what you might prepare. So here we've got a list of participant, what segment from a marketing perspective, again, because you want to speak your company's or your client's internal language, what brands they were actually considering, what channels they shopped, where they ultimately bought from online, what they actually bought, and how much they spent. All easily available at one glance. And here's another view for quotas. So when our marketing department says, hey, I've got this one persona that's super important to me, I'm only concerned with people who are assistant seekers, and I really couldn't give a care about these other folks, these self-service techies. They can look just at that information that's important to them and find out when things were completed as well, because that's the other thing when everything's super fast is what did the site look like on the day that that research happened? Another summary for you. Rolling up your high-level findings. So these are some findings from the actual purchase or the buy phase of the study. And ironically, help was not helpful. Those of you who work in UX and in e-commerce won't find that surprising, probably. And jargon is something people are suffering from as well. For our out-of-box findings, that's from our use phase. So people are taking delivery of their system and then actually unpacking it and setting it up and getting it used. Folks don't really appreciate what's pre-installed and all the time and energy that you're spending on designing and printing really nice materials for them to peruse are being completely ignored and thrown in the trash. Okay, so you spend all this time with your participants, and you develop these connections, they've let you into their homes. How do you bring their spirit back into the company without kind of oversimplifying or dehumanizing them? One page only. Here's some background and motivation. This is Chris. Chris was a lawyer who had his own firm with a couple of other lawyers. And because it was an independent business, he's the IT guy. And he's purchasing his computer for a secretary in the office. So a couple of critical snapshots and some of that background information. You've got all of that rolled up onto one page. Another snapshot. This is Peter from a small business. You've got all the relevant information on him in terms of age, location, some of that basic demographic, how much he spent, why he bought the computer, and then since we're interested not only in conversion and purchase, but we're interested specifically in helping or understanding why people are upgrading or failing to upgrade, we've got reference to what upgrades he made. Snapshots plus milestones. So we've got one page for a snapshot of Shelley, who was a self-service techie. Pink was really important to her. She wound up buying a pink computer. And here are the 10 milestones that she made along the way in her shopping journey. I apologize that we're not set up for audio. I do have the video to play, but there's not really much point if we don't have the audio. But another way to bring this stuff back to your organization is to show a snapshot plus some video of the relevant interaction or insight, and then also show some detailed perspective and context. So where this fits into the larger theme of that e-commerce journey. Fred and Kathy are my favorite. They had a 3+ hour interview where they allowed us into their home. We're frequently interrupted by beeping appliances in the kitchen and screaming children and people calling on the phone. We've got additional context for them about what they needed. And they were conflicted. They started off looking for a PC, but they became really frustrated over the 3+ hours that they were trying to shop on a particular e-commerce website and trying to configure a machine to meet their needs. And they ditched, and they wound up buying an Apple. Go figure. And Kathy says that I am so willing to pay to not be frustrated. This is why I buy things online. I don't browse, I don't like shopping, I like to go. I like to find what I want. And they were really just so exhausted that the website wound up pretty much driving them to Apple, because they then saw a comparison page with 3 choices and nothing was overwhelming, and they had just spent so long on the other one. So here's that additional context I was talking about in terms of the purchase process, so you can see where this particular insight fits into that journey. Okay, so meeting our goals. So competitors are doing right. If you're careful when you're doing this, you're including your competitors. And so you're collecting data on how those choices shake out in the real world. And so you wrap that up and you tie it up with a bow and you bring it back to your organization. And I think that what was really effective in this case was doing a little roadshow with it. So this is very time and labor intensive work. You've made a huge investment. I think it's really important to share with your stakeholders first, but once you have given them the preview and they've had the first pass at that, to share that with the larger teams. And you can call meetings, and I would suggest that you do, but it's sometimes more fun to just throw a little party or have a little fair that you announce where you've got a conference room that's kind of commandeered for a day or even a week. And you've got regular show times of key videos. You can just have those playing all the time. You can start each one off with a presentation, which I would kind of recommend. Let's say you've got a 2-hour, maybe your block of time for each showing is 2 hours. You might start that with a presentation, because what you don't want is people walking in, seeing a clip of a video and going, oh, I got this. Now I know exactly what this was, when in fact, you might have conflicting findings. You want to help distill everything and make sure everyone's walking away with a consistent sense of things. So I would say start with a presentation or end with a presentation, but make that a required part of each show time. And then also you can have, because there are so many people and so many different segments to consider, make sure that your schedule shows which segments, basically what's playing, what will be covered at any time, so people can pick and choose the sessions that are right for them to attend. So this is what we set out to discuss this evening. Hopefully we've answered that. If I didn't, please hold me accountable at the end. I would like to answer any questions that you have. And I gave you a laundry list earlier when not to do ethnography. Here's the list of when you should. So do it when you've already answered the easy questions. Do it when you're already using a variety of tools. Do it when your team has some political capital with your organization and you're ready to play more broadly with other teams within a company. Do it when your execs care about UX, and do it when they can handle the truth. Thank you.
Any questions for Annette?
Hi Annette, thank you very much indeed for this presentation. I've got a question to do with, I want to make sure though, I might put my foot in, but I don't think so. When you spoke about the couple, you draw that kind of persona, kind of profile out of them, and you mentioned all of those noises and disturbances throughout those 2-3 hours spent with them, yeah?
Yeah.
Did you actually ever mention that to the stakeholders, to the sponsors, or were
the stakeholders informed about how much time we spent with participants?
No, about the news of the point of them having all of these children around and just messing around.
Oh, yes, they absolutely were informed that this was done that it was done in as natural a setting as possible. So the participants actually set where and when they were going to be shopping for this stuff. They determined that themselves. If they wanted to do it at work, even if it was a personal purchase, if they could allow us to come to work, we'd come to work.
I'm asking you this because I'm quite new to the user experience industry, but I have realized actually that so far, I don't see much about that feelings. I mean, that is annoying. If I've got my son around just doing something and I want to concentrate, I have to have a balance. And if the balance doesn't come because he's a human being with feelings and he has emotions and he's maybe wanting to take the mickey out of me, I will have to deal with that whether I like it or not, or drop the shopping altogether. I think this is a very important issue in every people's life. I come from the filmmaking industry where when you write the script, scene follows another, yeah? And I think life is the same. It's not the same in terms of the fictional thing, but scene, after finishing this workshop, I will commence my new scene. If you want to think about my new sequence, because this has been like 3 hours, yeah? But if you think about sequences or scenes in lives, it's actually the same. When you wake up, it's one scene. When you go to the toilet, it's the next scene. All of that process until you come out to go to work, it's a sequence. I think this is quite important to reflect upon who users are in reality, yeah? What do you think about that?
Well, I think that's a great point. I think I would also add that I don't know a lot of people. So even though we're out of the lab and we're in a living room and this is a purchase that people are making with their own money, we're just paying, initially for that research as they're gathering their own information to decide what they want to buy, we're paying a flat rate. After that, for the purchase phase, for the buy phase, we're paying a percentage. So you must spend, our criteria was that you must spend at least $1,000. That's what you intend to buy. We're going to give you at least 20% of whatever your final total is, okay? Because we don't want to influence the configuration and the upgrades. We want to see what they naturally buy. And if we just, if we do like Jared's school with the compelled shopping and just buy everything, then they're going to just load up the cart, right? I would say, even though we're doing this in a natural setting, I cannot imagine, if we were not there, that people would have the patience to persevere for 3 hours. 3 hours. I mean, ultimately they did give up, but I think if we weren't there, that they would have given up sooner, right? And been like, forget this, right?
I'm asking you this because in the marketing industry, I've well, Annette. And I see overall, I'm just generalizing, just so I'm not including all, but you know what I mean, yeah? It's quite interesting how people see from the marketing point of view things. They see customers, and I know the customer. My name is Daniel, I am a human being, I'm 35 and I live in London.
Right.
So to me that premise is above everything, and I don't like to be taking the mickey off, so I like to be personalized. And it's difficult to please all of us, but in the same fashion, characters in
Right.
movies, they have universal truths that many of us refer to. So I want to be given that percentage of the satisfaction rather than just being treated as a customer. That doesn't make sense in my understanding, in my brain.
You want to be treated like a human being? I think that's our other big universal from this, right? Doesn't everyone want to be treated as a human being?
I don't think so.
Unless you're a robot.
With your research techniques, with your ethnographic techniques, you mentioned that you did some interviews at home, some at the store. You touched on very briefly that you did it some online. How did you do that?
Yeah, so initially, especially because we were starting from a very large field and narrowing down over time, and we did that for a number of reasons, because people weren't sure. You can't ask somebody what they want to buy when they don't know yet, right? When they're just trying to figure out what they want to buy. And so we started with a larger number of people, and we emphasized online a bit more, and online chat and discussion with them a bit more, because they were scattered over a wider geographical area, and we had more people to cover in a shorter amount of time. So the people that were very interesting at that point, we would make arrangements with individually to follow up with and shadow into a store and those things. But we didn't do that for absolutely everybody in that initial learn or research phase.
And did you do just ethnographic, or did you combine that with other research techniques?
I mean, I think the whole thing is really a kind of an amalgamation of different things, but I would characterize the work itself as ethnographic. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
It's perhaps a bit related, but also in the beginning you mentioned that sometimes you had participants where you were more or less interested in. So how do you kind of deal with that when you kind of figure out that, okay, maybe these guys aren't so interesting for my, how did you cope with that?
So yeah, so I think that we built that in by design, I think, because in terms of our narrowing funnel of starting out with that larger population for learn, and then a little bit smaller for buy, and then even smaller with the people that we followed in terms of the out-of-box experience and setting up their machine. And I think that's because you learn different things as the research is going on, and I think it's very difficult to start out right out of the gate and go, I know exactly what I'm interested in. I think that those things kind of, you uncover them as you're working, and as you're working with your corporate partners as well, different things may come up that are a bit more topical for them, or are just a bit more pressing organizationally that maybe you didn't know at the beginning of the study, and now somebody is more interested or more in line with something that's interesting to the organization, and ultimately you're trying to bring that value and that insight back to the company, so that person's going to be more likely to be someone that you want to follow up with. Likewise, if somebody is just like with a usability test participant, if you get somebody who's just, won't talk to you and is just maybe abrasive or is just shut down, you just kind of cut your losses with them, right? You don't continue to try to follow up. So the folks that just didn't feel appropriate, we just kind of let them fall out of the study. We just didn't invite them, because I do want to make clear that at the very beginning with the learn and research phase, we didn't say, hey, we're doing this huge longitudinal study, and we want to understand what goes into your shopping research, how you decide what you want to buy in a computer, and then we want to actually watch you buy the computer, and then once you buy the computer, we want to watch you open the box, because we knew that we weren't going to take it that far with everyone. So it was approached discreetly for each different stage. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so you kind of softly taper them off without rejecting them.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay.
No rejection.
Sorry, I have a question. You were saying that you paid the percentage of the computer they bought.
Right.
So, do you have any insight how that influenced their decisions? Final.
I don't, other than to disclose to you the comparison and contrast between the approach that I took, the reasons why I took it, compared to Jared Spool's compelled shopping, right?
Yeah.
I felt that it was too much to buy a whole computer outright. Likewise, too expensive because we're already paying to recruit a large number of people. We're paying incentives for each of these separate studies, if you will. The tally can quickly add up to a very large sum. And so by paying a percentage, we're able to keep that expense a bit more reasonable and also come up with a more accurate expense to forecast with.
Well, I was more like seeing the point from the person that you are interviewing.
Right.
If you know you are paying me, I don't know, maybe $50 for that step,
Right.
$50 for the second step, and the third step, you know, they will pay me 20% of the final purchase. But for some people, it might also influence what they will buy as final decision because, you know, okay, so I get 20% from them of this purchase I'm going to make, so I can get like a better.
I think it's a fair point. I don't have the information to share with you for this study, but I could say that it's something that if you were doing your own study, you could certainly get at. And what you would want to look at is your shopping purchases on the site as a whole and looking at the number of items, what particular item, like what are the most common upgrades, what's the amount of upgrades, all of those types of information, and then compare that with the population that you did to make sure that you had a representative sample. So it's certainly something that's possible.
Any other question? Oh yeah, wow.
Hi, I'm really interested in something you said earlier. When these people, they were for 3 hours trying, and you said they would have given up earlier if we weren't there. Is there any techniques, ethnographic or other, that you would recommend? Because I'm quite interested in catching that point when they actually will give up closer to when they will give up in real life.
Yeah. And I do want to also make the caveat here that that 3+ hours wasn't spent 100% dedicated to this task because, as we said, it's very interrupt driven in real life. So, okay, now we take 5 minutes out and deal with the baby and change the diaper and then come back, right? But that's also really important information for you to have dealing with your e-commerce site because you're able to see as the observer where they were from a cognitive perspective before that interruption. And do they recall where they left off, or are they now starting again from scratch? And in this instance, it was about 50-50. Sometimes they remembered, and sometimes it was like, oh, okay, let's take a step back, or 2 or 3. I think, true ethnography is much more passive, just in terms of being that fly on the wall. It is participant observer in terms of being in the environment and kind of trying to be part of that group of whatever population it is that you're studying. I don't really have a good answer for you. I'm sorry, other than maybe some electronic options that we have. I mean, if you were doing this today, because this study is several years old at this point. If you were doing this today, I think you might try some of this just with webcam. We did some of that, but it was fairly limited because of some privacy concerns and things like that, legal issues in terms of recording people in their home, and you don't want somebody to forget that they're being recorded and they walk in their underwear, that kind of thing, right? Now all of a sudden you're in trouble with HR, with your corporation, because what are you doing with not only customer data, but customer video? I'll let you know if I think of anything there.
I wanted to ask if you could give an idea of numbers of participants. You just said it was a few years ago now, so maybe you can't remember, but it's really interesting to know. So for each different part of the study, roughly how many people?
Yeah, I can't recall the exact numbers, but I can give you just a sense
Just
of
roughly
scale.
would-
Yeah, if that's all right, a sense of scale. I would say our initial phase, probably in terms of confirmed recruits, so that's people who are actually participating in the study for that initial learn or research phase, probably around 150, 200. Narrowing down in the next phase, probably to more like 40. And in the final use stage to more like 20, 15, 20. And that final stage was fairly long because we were interested in support. So we did the initial unpacking out-of-box experience, and then we followed for 6 months.
Hi, a few things that have come up, but I'm trying to get my head around it. Would you say that at the first purchase stage, what you did, would you call it contextual inquiry in a way? How would you compare it to a normal usability test where, because they were actually performing the purchase on the computer, right?
Yeah. I think this has a lot in common with contextual inquiry. I think that I've done contextual inquiry work in the past, but that has tended to be much more task-specific and controlled environments, so things like call centers and internal applications where you're studying a pretty well-defined task versus something that was much more open-ended. So I think if you're going to compare and contrast, you could say that the initial phase of this study, where we're studying the learn or the research phase of how people are deciding what it is that they want, that's a bit more pure ethnographic versus contextual inquiry. I think the transactional stuff is a little bit more well-defined because the task is just, you know what you want, buy what you want, right? And it's just studying what the variations are in that.
And another quick thing about the purchase, the percentage that you were giving them. I haven't read the school's article, like read it. Why do we have to do that? What's the huge benefit? Why not? If somebody wants to buy a computer, you just give them the incentive that you give to everybody else and let them pay for it. Why? What's the huge advantage? We talked about the disadvantages if we are paying for the computer. What's the huge advantage?
I feel like this is a huge ethical dilemma for me to stand up here and give Jared's talk. Why would you want to do a compelled shopping analysis versus a standard usability test where you just pay a static incentive that's $200 or whatever and it's a flat rate? The idea is that your participant is more purely motivated because it's not a hypothetical. The computer for them is not a hypothetical computer that they're buying, it's something they will actually get. And so because they are actually going to have, they will enter their own address and it will be shipped to them if it's a canoe or a computer or whatever it is, a tennis racket. So since that is actually coming to them, they should get what they actually want.
Yeah, I agree with that. But if they are planning to buy one anyway, then they will buy it, but just don't pay for it because they're going to pay for it.
Yeah, but they're not going to let you watch them. We're professional voyeurs, for those of you who are not aware, that's what we do.
Right, is there any other question for
A
Annette?
quick one actually is to do with, you were mentioning about these sponsors, yeah. How do you encounter overall the experience of dealing with it? I mean, do sponsors nowadays start understanding, or do they understand, or do they not give a damn about what the user experience person or ethnographer can actually bring to the table in terms of them being helped to hopefully increase their revenue or whatever they are aiming at?
Do sponsors care about real people when they're trying to increase their revenue? Is that the question?
Yeah, I think so.
It depends entirely on the organization. It depends entirely on, we can have a big philosophical discussion about this. It depends entirely on the individual and on the organization. What have they been exposed to in their professional career? What have they seen? If they have worked for more progressive companies, they're more likely.
In your experience overall, what do you think
there's no normal in my experience. You have to approach each company and each staff and each executive as an individual.
And maybe we should have the philosophical questions with a glass of wine or